Hello and welcome to this week's review of My Hero Academia Vigilantes. This week I'm talking about the episode Stumbling into Nasty Business. And if you stumbled into nasty business, then you should use Pudding Well soap. It's recommended by 1 out of 10 competitive Smash Brothers Melee players. Ha ha ha! Anyway, with that out of the way, let's get into the positives as we do at the start of these reviews, because it's time to get down to the action and crabs! Things are really kicking off this week as the whole villain distribution network scheme has been revealed. And now it's time to bring it down once and for all. This is very much an action-focused episode that has been split almost neatly into two halves. The opening half of this episode is a lot more lighter and a lot more about character moments and a little bit more about the detail on the snippy crab policewoman, and the second half is the much more action-heavy and exposition-heavy. And I have to say that both halves of this particular episode are done decently well for what they are, though I do honestly think that one half was done far better than the other, though we'll get onto that just shortly. It is time, of course, for our heroes to leap into action. It's time for Crawler and Popstep to save the day, using all their wit, guile and power to bring about a brighter dawn and a new age of peace and prosperity. And no, I'm not referring to them about fighting the villains or cracking the smuggling operation. No, I'm talking about Popstep having to wear the promotional crab mech suit and Crawler being there. With all of this being in service of a presentation that we only ever see the beginning and the end of. Look, I can't criticise the writers too much for not getting to some kind of big corporate presentation, because even by my weird world building interests, that's a bit niche, but even still, it feels like there's just this whole rich vein of comedy gold that just hasn't been mined at all. Even just something rather nominal where Popstep is just getting used to using this mech suit thing and she accidentally knocks someone over because ha 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 ha, physical humour, that would at least have been something, but sadly we don't get that. This episode, however, is not devoid of humour, though I can't say with wholehearted honesty whether the humour in this episode is intended or not. There is a line early on by the owner of the crab snack company who says why he doesn't know why that they're there, which did make me laugh, though again, I'm not entirely sure how intentional that humour is. Like, I'm reading it at the time thinking, well, if you don't know why the fuck you're here, then how the fuck am I supposed to know about that? Because it turns out that the crab snack company guy didn't know that this was supposed to be a mascot convention and seemingly just thought it would be a standard industry convention. To be fair, though, this whole mascot idol thing just seems to have been pushed to the side in the main story itself, so I can forgive him for not understanding and realising that that was supposed to be the case here. This whole company, it turns out, didn't have a mascot up until relatively recently. Last week we learnt that the Snippy Crab Lady wasn't really an idol, she was an undercover cop. And this week that we learned that she wasn't even an idol within this company up until recently. She used to work in the market and then she was promoted to be an idol because she was just really good at sales and had a good presentation technique. So that's how she ended up getting to this stage in where things are, which, okay, great, good, it's an interesting twist to things. It shows how she's been able to rise up in the company, how someone who, by what we've seen of her, probably shouldn't be a mascot is able to get into that position. That is fine, that is good, that's a nice little bit of building, but as I say, I'm not entirely sure whether this whole sequence of events is supposed to be humorous or not. I will have to reread it again. I've read it about 5 times and I'm still not entirely sure about it, because you know, I can't get away from the fact it feels like this whole idol convention thing has been largely forgotten, which I will admit is going to be a rant for the whole volume review as a whole. I will admit that it's going to sound like I'm ragging on this episode quite a lot, especially bearing in mind this is supposed to be the positives section, but I have to say that as a whole entity, without getting too far into the overview itself, that this episode just feels good enough. It doesn't sink below the lines to become a bad episode, but there's nothing about it that really feels truly remarkable about it, to me. As explained, it is just kind of good. There's some moments of comedy, but as I mentioned previously, I'm not entirely sure whether they're supposed to be funny intentionally or not. As a whole entity, though, the pacing is great. There's no part of it that feels as though it's dragging along too much, which is actually pretty decent, bearing in mind just how much exposition there is in this episode itself, and the fact they're able to make that pass rather neatly without it feeling as though like it's just one long block of text is good. The artwork is consistent all the way through. It's all of a decent and great quality. The action sequences are well put together. And I have to say that those crab mech suit things are both this unique combination about looking cool but yet really absurd at the same time. Like, it feels odd to me that they'd be using them in the warehouse, because as far as we're aware, they're supposed to be like a promotional thing, but hey, maybe they had a bunch of backup suits left over and the people in the warehouse just thought to themselves, well, we might as well use it. I'm not throwing my back out, and these used to be for moving boxes, so let's use them again. Or maybe they decide to retrofit all their mech suits to look like crabs because of brand synergy or whatever. I think they look neat, they look cool, and I'm interested to see what they'll end up doing with the action sequence next week that involves them. I will say that I did really enjoy the sequence where, during the whole briefing section, where they are speculating on what exactly the motivations of the Monster Factory really are for doing all of this. I will admit that it does go some way to nip in the bud some criticisms that I had for this element with the story, because it seems that the ambiguity with it is intentional. Hopefully, we'll soon see as this all develops going forward, but for the here and now, they almost literally say, we don't really know what's going on here, we might find out in time, but for now, we just need to stop them. And I think that's decent, and in this episode, they do speculate as to why the Monster Factory are doing things in the way that they are, because I have my own theories, but for the here and now, what has been established is that it doesn't seem like the Monster Factory are doing this to be profitable. They're not doing this so they can sell the drugs to other criminal enterprises. They're not doing this to ship it out across the world. They just seem to be sending it out willy-nilly. Why exactly they're doing that, we don't know yet, but it's intentionally ambiguous. And I will have to say, as kind of like a side note here, I am happy that we don't have someone who just guessed it in one. Like, I could easily imagine a moment where you have some character that stood in the corner of the room, half lit in shadow, their arms folded, they're supposed to look super cool and badass and studious, and they go, well, obviously the real reason why they're doing this is because and just things go from there, and that immediately would then cut into a moment with our villain saying something along the lines of,
yes, everything's going according to plan.
We don't get that. We don't get someone guessing it and then explaining it to the audience. This is setting up for a mystery that maybe will be revealed and solved by the end of this volume or further along. Like I say, I have my theory as to why they're doing this, but I am glad that they didn't just go, I wonder what they're doing here. Well, obviously they're doing X, Y, and Z. Oh wow, it turned out they were doing X, Y, and Z. Thank you for figuring it out. Mysterious guy in the background. We didn't get that. I'm thankful of that. It creates a mystery that we can debate and discuss as we go forward. But again, I have my theory. That theory being that they're just doing this just to spread chaos. But we'll see how that goes going forward. And of course, we then get to this snippy crab cop lady finding the drugs almost effortlessly, which on the one hand did kind of annoy me, but on the other hand, she has been working for the crab snack company for quite some time, so she knows what she's looking for. She will know what's supposed to be there and what's not supposed to be there. So that makes perfect sense. That works for me. That's okay. I give that the thumbs up. That gets the pass. And thereafter, we get a good, decent look at the delivery man. No, not Vince Vaughn from that movie that no one remembers, but our current villain who hasn't been given a name yet, so I'm just going to keep referring to him as the delivery man. And the subsequent action sequence that we get thereafter, as short as it is, I think is great. As I mentioned previously, I think the artwork here is great. I think it is really solidly well put together, and it creates this great sense of speed and weight to it. No pun intended, bearing in mind that fat gum is a major factor of all of this. The way that it uses the panel sizes to convey speed and the pace of events is something I really do enjoy seeing with this series as a whole, and once again they do it here and they do it near perfectly, especially when we get that brief sequence where the delivery man is hacking into the computers to make the crab suits go loco and start smashing up the price, which really helps to build up and ranch up the tension to everything that's going on here and make it feel as though it's constantly building up to this great big crescendo moment that we're going to end up having next week or maybe the week after, as we're all getting to this big climactic crab battle, which, as gratuitous and silly as that may end up being, I am looking forward to it because I think this is going to start getting into the negative, so I'll just say this here and now. I'm looking forward to the big crab battle because it will maybe potentially give our hero something to do. With that in mind, let us get into the negatives. Now, I don't want to beat a dead horse too much here, but as I've said pretty much every week since we got into this whole story arc, Crawler and Popstep are barely in it, and they barely contribute anything to the story at hand. This whole mystery with the drug smuggling operation, they're not really contributing much, if anything, to it. They're just off to the side, doing their own thing, and even then, they're not doing much. The writers have almost successfully skipped out on every opportunity for character development and light comedy with them, so now they're just kind of there, and that really does annoy me, but that is something that I will discuss in greater detail when we get to the big volume review in a few weeks' time. The big issue that I have with this particular episode, however, is at this point it makes the whole mascot idol thing make increasingly less sense with each passing episode. Now, I get why the whole mascot idol thing is happening on a meta level. The writers need an event that Popstep and Crawler can be involved with without it feeling too tenuous or needing countless pages of setup and exposition to explain why they're there and why they're going there. And as I've said in the past, using a performance event as a cover to do a drug deal makes some degree of sense. It also makes a degree of sense using a convention like this because, there's going to be a lot of deals being done behind the scenes, there's going to be a lot of product moving about, there's going to be a lot of samples moving about, so it's easy to just stash the stuff in different boxes and just off you go to the races. And whilst it makes sense on both those levels to have an event like this, the reality, of course, is that neither one of those events is really being used here. They're both just there as window dressing. They're all just there just for the excuse to make sure that our heroes have a reason for being here. Like, we can speculate that the Monster Factory is targeting this event because it's attached to a market. There's going to be a lot of different companies involved here. Some of them are going to be working on a regional level, some are going to be working on a national level. Hey, some might even be working on an international level. So targeting this one area, this one distribution centre, with all these different companies involved with it, is a lot more effective than just going after the Crab Snack Company or going after the Rice Ball Company or whatever. And from what we see in this episode, there's that little pre-recorded message where it talks about how the Crab Snack Company ships out to 50 locations nationwide, and you consider all the different companies that are involved here. From just one afternoon's work of just hiding these drug samples here and there, they can quite easily just get almost their stuff across the entire country in next to no time. It would probably be just a one-off smash and grab kind of thing, because as soon as the police track back to this being the location where all this kicked off from, they're never going to be able to do something like this ever again. So even just for the sake of just causing sheer chaos, it makes sense. Whilst it is somewhat convoluted, again, it still makes sense. And yes, there's still a few gaps here and there in the logic of it, like, who are they sending this out for? Is it going out to specific people and locations? Or is it just really random? They are just put something in this box, just make sure they have as much coverage as possible. Are they hoping that the trigger stuff will trigger and contaminate some foodstuffs, which could cause people to mutate into monsters and start attacks across the nation, again just for the sake of chaos? Or are they doing all this as a distraction for something else they have in the pipeline? We don't know, and this is stuff that we no doubt we will learn as time goes by. But again, as convoluted as this setup is, it makes sense. However, with all that said, there really is no reason for this to take place at an idol mascot convention in the first place. And the truth is that this volume has done nothing to justify it taking place at this location, outside of it just being the case for the sake of sheer story convenience. We are truly descending into we need to give our characters something to do territory. They could quite easily have just done this as being, this was just some big warehouse where everything's getting shipped off from, and that was it, and our heroes just happened to stumble upon it. The fact that it's supposed to be an idol mascot convention, you'd think would end up giving Popstep something to do and to give her a time to shine, to come into the spotlight and to really develop her character and to round them off, but we don't get that. And even with this being the case, this existing purely and simply just so it gives our two main characters something to do, they're not doing anything, because it genuinely feels at this point the writers of this manga would rather write about Eraserhead and the other pro heroes more so than our two main characters. They're so much fixated on what Eraserhead and Fat Gum and the Sleepy Crab cop lady are doing that our two main characters might as well not be in it, because they've really not contributed anything to it. This whole idol mascot thing, it's just window dressing. There's been nothing else here. No fun little gags, no little asides, nothing. We've not even seen the other idol mascots or anything like that. They're here just for an excuse to be here so that we remember, oh, these two are the two main characters, and I really don't like that. As with... But let's just move into the overview and just say, as I mentioned previously, I think this episode is good enough. I will admit that this really does feel like connecting tissue between two major parts. Though with that said, most of this particular story arc has felt like connecting tissue between two major parts. Our main characters have done next to nothing, and this week they've done next to nothing again. The only people that are doing stuff are our side characters, and that frankly isn't good enough for me. The writers went out of their way to create the perfect scenario for our two main characters to get involved in, and then did nothing with our two main characters, and then did nothing with the event. It's all just window dressing, and that really does annoy me. The episode itself, again, is fine for what it is, but it really doesn't take itself to the next level to quite the extent that it really should do, and that is a genuine shame. But hey, maybe next week we'll get some epic crab battle, and at the very least, the sheer spectacle of that will be fun enough that I can just sit back and go, okay, that's cute, that's fun, good on you for at least delivering that. But whether or not that will be the case, we'll soon see. But hey, given that Popstep's crab mech suit thing's going crazy, that at least means that Crawler's probably maybe going to do something. But we'll soon find out. But anyway, with that said, let's get into Comment Corner! It's time for Comment Corner! Only one comment this week, but to be fair, given how much YouTube's in deleting interfering with this channel, hey, I might have had others, but this is the only one that's gone through. This one comes from Big X1, and they say, these early skets are getting wilder. I like this episode for the most part, but I agree it feels like Crawler and Popstep aren't doing enough. Thank you for your comment. Of course, that's referring to the sketches that I did towards the start of the previous two videos. None really this week because I haven't had time to, and the whole deleting views thing kind of kicked the wind out of my sails earlier this week. But yep, it happened again, but the reviews were added back in around Wednesday evening, sometime very, very late into Tuesday, whatever, it doesn't matter. I've been up since 6:30 this morning, give me a break. But anyway, thank you for your comment, and thank you for the comment about the early sketches. The previous episode, I think was fine. That's been the overriding thing for most of this season up until this point, or most of this volume. It's all episodes are just fine, but they can never really take that next level into becoming something better. And I think that's mostly due to the fact that, as I've said time and time again, and I'll probably end up saying again when it comes to the next review, or possibly even the volume review itself, it really doesn't feel like Crawler and Popstep have really done enough to really make the most of this whole sequence of events, this whole setting. It feels like there's just so much missing here that could have been done, but that is a discussion for all of the time. With that said, by all means, ladies and gentlemen, leave a comment down in the comment section down below, and I will read it in a future video, providing, of course, YouTube doesn't delete it. I don't know why it's been doing all this recently. I have a few suspicions. It's nothing dark or anything. I just think that I share these on Discord, and I think it might be thinking the Discord traffic might be suspicious. Because at the end of the day, when the views get restored, it's more or less the same as it was when just before they deleted them. So I really don't know. But hey, I'm starting to waffle now. I'll just say thank you all for listening, and see you next time. Goodbye! Thanks for watching. Be sure to like, favourite, subscribe, click the bell, and do all the YouTubey stuff that YouTube wants you to do. Go on, it'll do me a power of good. Until next time, my friends, goodbye!